Escape Artists is on Twitch. Why don't you join us? On Wednesday nights, Alistair reads a bedtime story, and Sunday mornings, we do a few hours of chill gaming. Plus, we have interviews, special guests, pickup streams, and more. Visit twitch.tv/EA Podcasts and follow us to be notified when we go live and access VODs of past broadcasts. You can support us there too, with monthly subscriptions as well, or if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can support us for $5 a month for free. Free. Visit escapeartists.net/Twitch for a full walkthrough.
Escape Pod. Episode 940. Nobody Ever Goes Home to Zhenzhu. By Grace Chan.
Hello, and welcome to Escape Pod, your weekly science fiction podcast. I'm your host this week, Tina Connolly, and I am here to bring you Nobody Ever Goes Home to Zhenzhu by Grace Chan. This story first appeared in Lightspeed magazine. Grace Chan is a speculative fiction writer and doctor. She can't seem to stop scribbling about minds, cyborgs, technology, duplication and duplicity, and alien landscapes. Her short fiction can be found in Clarkesworld, Lightspeed, Fireside, Hexagon, and many other places. Her debut novel, Every Version of You, is about staying in love after mind uploading into virtual reality. You can find her online at gracechanwrites.com and on Twitter as gracechanwrites. Your narrator this week is Isabel J. Kim. Isabel J. Kim is a Korean-American science fiction and fantasy writer based in New York City. Her fiction has been published in Clarkesworld, Cast of Wonders, and Choreo, and she hosts Wow, If True, a podcast about internet culture. Find her online at isabel.kim or on Twitter as Isabel J. Kim. Your audio producer this week is Summer Brooks. So get ready to descend to the planet, because it's story time.
Nobody Ever Goes Home to Zhenzhu. Written by Grace Chan. Narrated by Isabel J. Kim. I'd always known Calum would run. He had all the signs: a taut restlessness, body brittle as an overstretched lute string when we stayed too long in one place, a gloom in his eyes as we drifted through stretches of dead space, a sullen crease between the brows whenever I tried to ask how he landed in the dead-end Martian workshop at 17. But after 10 years, why now? Drumming my fingers on the battered dashboard, I gazed through the viewport at the planet below. My retina flooded with information from the records. Zhenzhu, once the pearl of the Feng system, terrestrial, mostly ocean, strung around with island chains like jeweled necklaces. Now, centuries after colonization, tainted puce-colored whorls obscured its aquamarine surface. It's not difficult to track a person. As a beaconer, I do it for a living. I could have dug into Calum's past at any point in our travels together, but we'd maintained an unspoken code until, in sneaking off without so much a jotted message, he'd broken it. My preliminary sweep of both assembly-run and private surveillance databanks had uncovered a torrent of brainwave, kinetic, and metabolic signatures matching Calum's to various degrees. Even without the biodata, the clumsiest beaconer could have used the serial numbers of his cybernetic enhancements to pinpoint his whereabouts in inhabited space. After discarding the outliers, I still had a clear record of his movements dating back not just days, but years. It was my first time to Zhenzhu, but not Calum's. I moved the left-handed bandit out of orbit into a stealthy descent. Calum's trail unspooled in shimmering blue on my retina, through damp-slicked alleys thick with cinder smoke and burnt oil to Murang's Canal District, On the opposite bank, mushroom-shaped skyscrapers loomed against an ochre sky, air traffic zipping around their stalks like glittering fireflies. The waterside market was a noisy sea of aluminum-roofed stalls, food carts with illustrated curtains, vending droids on flexible legs, and tricycle-hauled trailers piled with mass-produced trinkets. The citizens of Meringue, in tattered synthetic garments and homemade goggles, looked battered, weather-worn, like the crumbling commission flats that dominated the city slums. Fragments of conversation, a mix of common and local dialect, floated through the air. Zhenzhu's entry on the common records had been no different from the other first-wave colonization planets, an influx of diasporic groups. A few decades later, the Human Nations Assembly's coordinated terraforming effort. Now, things were cleaving along the usual lines. The expansionist elitists in their gleaming towers, birthed into new cash and new resources, and the leftovers seething in the slums, wrestling for scraps. The trail took me to a roadside stall where I gestured at the first item on the menu and lit a cigarette. I scanned the middle-aged vendor for enhancements. Ah, good. An active memory chip. I pinched the last couple of hours of recording and scrubbed until I saw Caleb's face. He'd been sitting in the seat I was in, hunched over a bowl of porridge. I activated my interpreting networks. Not as good as it used to be, Kang, Caleb was saying in a local dialect. Shut up, boy, said the vendor. You try making good food with stale ingredients. Zhenzhu's in decay. Imports, agriculture, all dying. The elitists don't give a shit about the dogs under the table, and you and me, we're the bottom of the bottom feeders. What's changed? Yen, look at you. You look well, healthy, 10 years gone. You're crazy to come back. Not staying. Caleb seized a deep-fried dough stick and crunched into it. Just here to see my mother. Your mother? Yeah. She sent me a message. She's dying. Kang stared flatly at Caleb. Boy, you know what your mother did to survive, right? Who she is now? I know. You still want to see her? She sent me a message, said Caleb again. Kang sighed and dragged a hand over his fleshy face. Let an old friend give you some advice, Yen. Even though you won't listen to me, finish your juk, go to the shipyard, and buy yourself a one-way ticket. Forget your mother. You did the right thing 10 years ago. You're not wanted on this rock. I snapped out of the playback when Kang slammed a bowl on the bench. Steaming rice gruel topped with a gooey black sphere. The fermented aromas made my mouth water. I hadn't had a fresh meal in weeks. Kang watched with a pleased expression as I stubbed out my cigarette and dug in. First time on Zhenzhu, eh? He spoke in common. How'd you know? No jacket, no goggles. Kang gestured at his own gear. After first time, you remember acid rain. Ah. That explained the eroded buildings, the stalls decked in aluminum sheets, the tense expressions as people flitted from door to door with their hoods pulled low. Acid rain was a bad sign. A sign that, after mere centuries, once again, we'd extorted too much from a planet. Forecast says rain coming in an hour, Kang said, pointing at the heavy sky. I suggest go somewhere safe. Silly Caleb. Did he really believe I'd let him go? He'd contrived an elaborate routine, sending his baggage ahead to a public locker, slipping away from the Thurnos bidding, muttering about a pleasure den, unleashing an actually decent pirate program to hide his escape via a stem cell colony ship. Sure, I could have snagged another mechanic. Thurnos was stuffed with sad souls vying to underbid one another for a warm meal and a warm bed. But after 10 years, you get used to someone. You figure out whether you can live with their worst habits. Kang called him Yen. I wasn't surprised to discover he had a different name. I remembered the half-starved squirrel boy, twitchy, shaggy-haired, covered in engine grease, who'd stepped out of that run-down Martian workshop. Mine had been a reluctant stopover. I'd been itching to shoot away from the Sol system, but the left-handed bandit had needed a new portside cannon cradle. The offer of a job had left my lips on impulse. Maybe, subconsciously, I'd wanted someone with secrets who didn't want to talk about them. Maybe in his brittle gloom and his unwavering silence, I felt an unspoken kinship. Well, this was probably one of the safest places on Meringue. I tracked Caleb to the tallest tower in the fancy district, watched as a statuesque receptionist led him to the elevators, and hacked the service elevator to follow him up to the penthouse suite. Sliding doors opened onto a hallway draped in cultural appropriation light. Whoever had decorated the penthouse was evidently a passionate but undiscerning fan of the Jovian satellite diaspora aesthetic. Embroidered silks and an imitation of the Ganymedian artisans softened the chrome walls. Traditional Callisto and music thrummed from the ceiling. There was even a hologram of the Europa sky, a fire-striped orb with a stormy red eye glaring above a rim of icy spikes. I activated my jacket's biocloaking tech before stepping out of the elevator, plunging straight through Jupiter's equatorial belts. The heat signatures of 6 or 7 people radiated from a large room on the north side of the penthouse. Bloody Caleb! Why hadn't he just told me about his mother? We could have come to Zhenzhu together. We could have put a plan in place. Now he was probably going to die, and I had to decide how much to risk my life trying to rescue the fool. I skulked my way to the service room. Wedged between a steel trolley and the wall, peeking behind door frame and door curtain, I had a partial view of a richly furnished lounge. Caleb was standing in front of a plush settee, shoulders hunched, eyes darting. Kneeling at a low table of burnished wood, the receptionist poured tea from a gilt teapot. She gestured for Caleb to sit. He lowered himself onto the settee, one hand clenched at his bag. "Where is she?" he demanded. "She's coming." The receptionist offered an enameled teacup in a graceful circle of fingertips. Her sleeves slipped down, revealing pale wrists. "Please." Caleb blew on the tea, but did not drink. A curtained doorway on the other side of the room parted. A woman stepped in. A silk robe hugged pyramidal breasts, cinched a wasp waist, and swished around elongated legs. Scarlet lips bloomed in a pearly, luminescent face. Beneath puffy eyelids, inhumanly violet irises glittered. She was someone's embodied fetish. She was not sick, and not at all dying. "Ma?" Caleb rose, dropping the cup onto the table. Hot tea splattered, his expression stretched halfway between a gasp and a grimace. The woman's head drooped toward her chest like a stalk of wheat snapped in a harsh wind. 4 more people came through the curtained doorway, a brown-haired, clean-shaven man in a high-collared gray suit and 3 soldiers in combat gear. One of the soldiers yanked Caleb's mother aside. In the same moment, Caleb scrambled backwards over the city and whipped his hand out of his bag. He was holding a gun, but it looked like a toy next to the soldiers' weapons. "You lied," said Caleb, his eyes hard and fixed on his mother's face. The scarlet mouth trembled. "I'm sorry, Yen." "I'm not surprised," Caleb hissed. "You sold us out before you sold yourself. Why wouldn't you sell out your last child, too?" The man in the suit stepped forward. From my hiding spot, I couldn't get a clear view of his face. But he reeked of elitist, oozing vitality, control, wealth. I wrapped my hand around my holster's reassuring coolness. "Now, boy, there's no need to scold your poor ma. We didn't really give her a choice. Come. We don't want this to be messy. Let's put that gun down, hey? Let's be civilized." "Evan," spat Caleb, "you've modded yourself so much I wouldn't have recognized you if not for that slimy voice." Evan spread his arms wide. I had a close view of his left hand extending from his cuff, which bore a coat of fair downy hair. On his index finger he wore a gold signet ring, imprinted with an eagle. "I told you we'd see each other again." "What do you want? It wasn't enough for you to kill my father, my brother, my sisters? To take my mother as your bed toy? To murder the Liu Ying because we were an inconvenience? Good grief, boy. You make it sound personal." Caleb was backed against a wall, both hands wrapped around his pistol. Sweat poured down his flushed face. He had 1 shot, at most. The soldier's enhancements were several years ahead of Caleb's. They could probably kill him at the first twitch of his trigger finger. I dipped quickly into the common records, searching for any entries about the Liu Ying people on Zhenzhu, or a massacre 10 years ago. Nothing. "Why go to such lengths?" Caleb hissed. "I'm a nobody. Why bother luring me back here just to kill me?" Evan took 2 steps forward. "You know I work clean. Loose threads are an irritation. Sometimes the Assembly likes to stick their nose into the past. They don't understand that cleaning up the lowlife is a necessary part of building a great planet. Call it tidying. Pursing his lips, Evan turned to his soldiers. A neural blast bludgeoned into my brain. I reeled. Are you waiting for me to fucking invite you in? It was Caleb. He knew. He knew I was here. Bloody... I went for the receptionist first. I'd seen the faint scars of implanted pistols in her wrists. She was unquestionably the most dangerous one in the room. I crossed the room in 4 strides. A Neuralink command to my weapons belt dispatched a chemical blast at Evan and his 3 henchmen. A small-range grenade. Probably leave 1 or 2 of them alive, but I didn't want to hurt Caleb or his mother. Pistol in hand, I fired at the receptionist. The bullet took her in the jugular. Blood sprayed in a crimson fan over the settee as she crumpled. I dove behind a grand piano fort just as the shots came. Darn, 2 still standing. Something hit my foot, but I felt no pain. I went low and ducked out, firing. Silence. The soldiers were sprawled on the carpet. 2 were melted by the chemical grenade. The 3rd had taken my shots in his chest and was gurgling his last breaths. Somehow I'd missed Evan entirely. But Caleb had got him. First was a bullet, and then was a knife to his face. I had to pull my mechanic away. Hey, I said. Hey, Caleb, come back. He collapsed onto his heels, gasping and shuddering, knife clattering from slack fingers. He gazed up at me, blank-eyed. You cursed Chagua, I snarled, prodding my finger into his forehead. What the fuck would you have done if I wasn't here? A delirious smile spread over Caleb's blood-splattered face. But you are here. Then he shivered and seemed to return to himself. His gaze dropped to my feet. Orin, you're bleeding. I glanced down. A puncture in my boot was leaking blood onto the carpet. The pain came to me distantly. I activated a neural net to scoop it up for later. You didn't have to smash into my head, by the way, I snapped, because snapping would keep the wooziness away. You took down 3 layers of delicate security work. I was about to waltz in and rescue you. Just had to make sure you didn't change your mind, didn't ye? Starting to wish I had. We both jerked our heads up at a soft noise. Caleb's mother was clawing at the velvety wallpaper, her body spasming. I limped up to her. Wei, you okay? She moved her lips, but no sound came out. She didn't look injured. Tentatively, I touched her shoulder. She crumpled into a heap, her chin coming to rest on her knees like a decommissioned android. Her artificial eyes looked through me, past me, toward the tall windows which were squealing beneath an onslaught of toxic rain. Forget her, Caleb said. His tone was detached but not cruel. She's been rewritten too many times. I came back to Caleb. We gazed down at Evan's corpse. Bits of jellied eyeball and stringy muscle were visible in the pulpy stew of what had been his face. I wondered if Caleb had ever killed anyone before. After I escaped, he said in a low voice, I tried to find others. Relatives, friends, anyone. Didn't have much luck. I've accepted that I'm the only one left. The only one who knows everything he did. He wanted my memory chips, probably would have ripped them right out of my head. Can't have an annoying Liu Ying kid popping up and making Zhenzhu's history look unpalatable. I scanned the body for ID enhancements. Evan Enders, date of birth 12/8/2571. Age 56 Earth years. Chief Minister for Sustainable Development, 3rd term of service. I drew in a sharp breath. He's Assembly. Big shot. He's got a scribe implant. Of course, Caleb glanced at me. How do you think he wrote Liu Ying out of existence? You think Assembly don't mod their own records? Wow, Orin, you're more of an optimist than I thought. Hey, what are you doing? The tip of my serrated knife was where Evan's nose had recently been. I'm taking it. Isn't that what you wanted? I know we're into murdering ministers now, but tampering with records, that's a crime against humanity, no? I've already done it once. I thought back to undulating swaths of gray, the pink fans of salt basins, smoky breaths fanning my face, and a virus I'd crafted to hide, to protect. I couldn't believe how guileless I'd been, just a few short months ago, about the way the galaxy worked. We'll write Liu Ying back into it, take that memory loop out of your head and upload it. A crime for humanity. No. No? Then we'd be just like him. Caleb wiped his hands on his pants, leaving grisly trails of the minister. Using stolen power for our own purposes. We should do more. We should tear down the walls, make it so anyone can amend it. The acid rain seemed to be hammering right into my skull, corroding the bony arches, shaking the floors and roots. For most of my life, I had avoided thinking about the assembly if I could. There was a reason a certain kind of people became beaconers. I felt suddenly foolish. For years, I'd thought that in fleeing the soul system and cutting all ties, I had defied them. But even as a beaconer, I was entirely in their thrall. I worked for cash. I delivered those with less to those with more. The records were yet another tool for the privileged few to conceal, to control. Caleb's mother lifted her face from her knees with a small, sad smile. Her whisper was barely audible beneath the rattling windows. Good chaos. An imprint of my own mother rose unbidden in my mind. Stolen, rewritten, forgotten. I squashed the memory away. That was another pain to deal with later. Can you do it, Oren? Can is a shitty word in common. It's a mashup of meanings, conflating degrees of ability with degrees of willingness until a whole spectrum of nuance is condensed into one clumsy term. In my mother's Callistoan dialect of the Jovian language, there are 13 different ways to say can, each with their subtle hints of inclination, capacity, importance, and immediacy. I wondered how Caleb would have asked in the Liu Ying tongue, and what he was really asking of me. He had never requested anything of me before. Not directly. Not like this. Taking a deep breath, I plunged a knife through Evan's crushed nasal bones. I thought I heard a whimper, a gurgle. The implant was nestled between his frontal lobes. Beneath the silver-scarlet sheen of viscous fluid, the scribe implant looked like a bronze slug coiled into a spiral. I wiped it roughly and tucked it into my glove, where it nestled warmly in the crease of my palm. Let's get back to the bandit, Caleb. Once we were free of Zhenzhu's orbit, I scrambled the left-handed bandit's outgoing positional data, an energy-draining program but necessary to conceal our next steps. The scribe implant sat on a dashboard cracked open and linked to the mainframe. Caleb dropped into the seat next to me. His poncho was melted in spots where it had caught some rain, a tuft of hair poked out of a hole in his hat. From his left cheek to his right temple, a spray of dried blood. The receptionist's, Evans, formed an angry crimson arc. "How'd she go?" "Freaked out when I tried to buckle her down," said Caleb wearily. "Had to give the sedative, and she's strapped into the bunk now." We hadn't talked about where we would take his mother, but that was a problem for later. Along with my injured foot, which I'd hastily patched, was a globule of Sutham, the puncture hole in my favorite boots, which still carried some rent and soil, and the twin pains I'd netted away in the back of my mind. Caleb leaned forward to gaze through the viewport. The angle of the Feng star revealed only a slender crescent of Zhenzhu, the pollution clouds creamy like frost milk against an inky backdrop. I glanced at him. "Will you miss it?" He shook his head. "It was never really home, you know. Even though I was born there, from the beginning they chased us out." The common records unfolded in shimmering hologram before us. A shiver thrilled through my body. I'd only ever seen the surface, the lacquered exterior of a puzzle box. But suddenly, we were in the heart of the labyrinth, with a bird's-eye map of deeply tangled layers of archives and a knowledge of where things had been knotted and unknotted, and at our fingertips a dangerous power to extract, rewrite, replace. It would not be difficult to break it open, unlock the puzzle box, crack open its compartments, and turn it inside out for anyone and everyone to play with. The common records would truly be common. "Huh," Caleb said. Touching a dirt-streaked hand to his temple, he neurolinked to the mainframe. A carefully compiled database unfurled from his memory chips. Holographs and names of the Liu Ying people, dates and places of birth, dates and places of death. There was a lot of information, almost 1,000 identities, but I could also see a lot of gaps. Trails gone cold, missing, whereabouts unconfirmed, presumed dead. I turned to him, Tears glimmered on his cheeks, carving paths through the blood. He reached over me to initiate the hack. The ghost blue faces of his grandparents, father, siblings, cousins drifted into their digital shrine. Page by page, the records opened to the galaxy. Good chaos, his mother had whispered. As the first wave flowed back to us, a deluge of grief and shock and fury, I shifted the left-handed bandit out of neutral, balancing on a knife's edge of stars, and waited for Calem's direction.
And we are back, and again, that was Nobody Ever Goes Home to Zhenzhu by Grace Chan, narrated by Isabel J. Kim. About this story, Grace Chan says, "This story came about when I was thinking about retcon, or retroactive continuity in fiction, when a new piece of information provides a complete reinterpretation of past events, and what is considered canon undergoes a metamorphosis. We retcon fiction, but don't we also retcon history? What sort of information is included or excluded from the canon of our historical stories?" The working title for the story was Retconning History, which, needless to say, did not survive beyond the first draft. And about this story, I say, I love what Grace says here about retconning history. That famous quote is absolutely true, that the victors get to write history. And if the victors get to write the official history books, then how do other stories remain? They get passed down as oral histories, unofficial texts, storytelling, etc., but they aren't necessarily a part of the official narrative. This is such an interesting world that Grace imagines here. I can imagine the idea for the scribes and their embedded recordings being pitched to someone as, official, unalterable history. But of course, nothing is truly unalterable. And so it's a lovely ending that our heroes decide here not just to fix this bit of history and get it right, but give all humans the power to fix history and get it right. And am I now imagining the Wikipedia-style comments on history patches? Yes. But even that feels right, because if you remember from the dawn of the internet, Wikipedia used to be considered not a trusted source for school papers, essays, etc. And now it is. Sometimes we don't get a tragedy of the commons, but a pretty awesome success of the commons. One last thing I'd like to mention is that Grace told us that this story is part of her Beaconer series, which features more stories about this bounty hunter/mechanic pair. So keep an eye out for those, because I can definitely imagine that they get up to many more exciting adventures together. And on one more note, a big congratulations to Escape Pod for its Hugo Award nomination and to all the other finalists. We are honestly all once again thrilled and honored to be recognized among so many other wonderful magazines. So thanks so much to all of you out there who voted for us. We truly appreciate it. Escape Pod is part of the Escape Artist Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Don't change it, don't sell it, please go forth and share it. How do you share it, you ask? Well, in addition to your social media of choice, consider rating and or reviewing us on podcast listening sites such as Apple or Google. More reviews makes for more discoverability, makes for more Escape Pod for you. Escape Pod relies on the generous donations of listeners exactly like you, and remember that Patreon subscribers have access to exclusive merchandise and can be automatically added to our Discord, where you can chat with other fans as well as our staff members. So, if you enjoyed our story this week, then consider going to escapepod.org or patreon.com/EAPodcasts and casting your vote for more stories that right the wrongs from a ship called the Left-Handed Bandit. Our opening and closing music is by Daikaiju at daikaiju.org, and our closing quotation this week is from Ray Bradbury, who said, "There's more than one way to burn a book, and the world is full of people running about with lit matches." Thanks for listening, and have fun.